Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello everybody at home and welcome to Houselights, specifically House of Stone, Oliver Stone, and we are finishing our biopics of the 90s plus this one because, frankly, I wanted to talk about it. This one's on me, and that's why I'm hosting this week. We're talking about Alexander from 2004. And tonight, as they're with me every single time we podcast, is Darren Moser and John Mills. How are you two doing tonight?
I'm going to be bringing up the right flank and then reversing direction and coming back toward the left flank. Darren's going to hold the center, and Tristan, I need you to hold the line later when the elephants show up.
All I'm going to be doing is making sure that the subtitles are there so we know which flank is going where.
Very key. And yes, very, very key, because there's a lot of dust on the battlefield. Whole lot of dust.
So this is your eagle eye in the sky reporting on the Battle of Macedonia, left flank over here.
Yes.
Good thing he had his drone following him throughout his life.
Mr.
Yes.
Moser, it was the Battle of Gargamel. So
that's a Smurf villain, and you can't,
I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm glad you made the joke, because the whole time I was sitting, every time they said Gargamel, I was like, Gargamel? Like I couldn't help it. I was just in there.
It's almost impossible not to. But yes, we were talking about Alexander, the movie that came out in 2004, based off of the life of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian, the man who conquered Persia and tried to conquer the rest of Asia. And he did it extremely young. And so crazy was his empire that they've made multiple movies about it. And we all know that is the gold standard. That, if you really want the great to follow your name, you have to have multiple adaptations in Hollywood.
Oh yes, very true, very true. And also, conveniently, his life story is in the public domain, so
there you go.
Very much more affordable, easier to get the rights to talk about him.
Just became available under Disney's new rules hundreds of years later.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Darren, have you seen this movie before?
I'm pretty sure I saw it in theaters, because 2004 would have been right around early college for me, and we were all film students. Of course, we went and saw the giant biopic Oliver Stone movie. So now that would have been the theatrical version. I don't think I saw it since then, but it was really fun to revisit, except for the time length. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to hop on it anymore. We all know it's a long movie, and I knew what I was getting into. But no, this would probably be my second time watching.
Okay, but your first time watching the Ultimate Cut.
Yes.
All right. Now, John, had you seen this in the theaters?
Not even one moment of it, because when it came out, I was newly married when this came out. I was newly married, so we weren't much doing and I was starting a new job, all of that type of stuff. So I never really got around to it. And the critical reception of the theatrical version was so god-awfully bad that I was like, I'll sit this one out. That's okay. And would probably never have come around, probably would never have known that there were 4 different cuts of this film were it not for you, Tristan. And so I'm glad that you kept us on the path so that we watched the ultimate cut, which is not the final cut, nor the director's cut.
No.
So,
And that's something that we do need to address right at the top, because this movie has 4 cuts. That's insane. And the final cut is not actually the last cut.
Mm-hmm.
We have the theatrical cut, which came out in 2004. And then the very next year, it was re-edited before the DVD release later in 2005. And it's actually shorter than the theatrical cut. The director's cut is shorter. It went from 175 minutes down to 167 minutes because Stone felt like he got a lot of flack for, kind of being a little languid. And so he said, he's like, I'm going to tighten it up. I'm going to focus more on the action. And the thing is that this was Warner Brothers. Let me rephrase. It was one of Warner Brothers' greatest home release movies up until that time. It made so much money in the DVD for the theatrical cut that they're like, how about you make a director's cut? He's like, okay. And then that director's cut made even more money on the DVD sales than the theatrical cut. And Warner Brothers went to Stone and said, don't you have like a lot of footage left over? He's like, yeah, that's what I was complaining to you about when you wouldn't let me make my epic, when you made me cut it down for the theaters. And they're like, okay, well, now's your time. And so he made one called, this is true story, Alexander Revisited, Colin, the final unrated cut. And so this is basically like the final cut in 2007 is
then
basically
the black and white cut.
No, it's the kitchen
if it had been
sink.
a thing back then,
it would have been a thing. But this is the final unrated cut in 2007 was basically the kitchen sink. And then that was for 7 years. That was the only one available on Blu-ray. And then that one made a lot of money, and he was able to kind of sit on it for about 7 years. And he's like, you know what? I think I went too far with the final cut. I'm going to make an ultimate cut that came out in 2014. And that's the one that we watched, and that's his preferred version.
For all of the jokes, for all the comments you can make and everything like that, as a fan of the film, Tristan, how do you account for this? It gets such a crap reception. It tanks in the U.S. Absolutely
Hard.
Bombs in the U.S.
Hard.
Disaster of a film. Career derailer, if anything. And yet, it's making all of this money on home release. How do you account for that?
I think word of mouth. I think it failed miserably in the States and in the UK, and people hated it. People just really didn't like it. I think around that
Christmas
time
movie.
They were trying.
I don't think that this is not like hey, let's take the wife and kids to see Alexander in theaters.
It wasn't exactly a Christmas release. Like, it came out in November, but it had some stiff competition. I don't have the list in front of me, but I remember seeing that list and thinking like, oh crap, like this movie's going to get buried. I didn't see it in theaters. I love this movie. I right off the bat. Like, the reason why we're doing Stone's biopics of the 90s and Alexander's, because I just wanted to talk about Alexander. It took me a long time to fall in love with this movie. And it wasn't until the final cut in 2007 that I really started liking it, because I watched the theatrical cut on DVD when it came out, and I was like, okay, that's not very good. But then the director's cut came out. I was like, oh, I bet this is better. Then I was like, that's still not very good. It's a little tighter. But then once the full-blown kitchen sink came out in 2007, I was like, this is fascinating. This is a very different experience. But to answer your question, John, I think it was the critics hated it, and so that kind of it made people not want to go see it, because I think we put a little bit more stock in what critics said in 2004, I think. And I also think that we had a little bit more of a puritanical sensibility. And so there was a lot of stuff in here that I think people didn't always approve of. And there was some controversy around Alexander's bisexuality or pansexuality that was on display. And I think there was protests surrounding it because of that, specifically in Greece. And I think it, just like a lot of people thought it was bland and boring. And the thing is that like this was an epic. This was an over 3-hour epic that was cut down tremendously, even though 175 minutes is nothing to sneeze at. Like, that's a long movie to begin with. But
yes,
yet,
it is.
It was still robbed of so many character-driven moments that really made the piece. And so I think it was a victim of being forced to a specific runtime, critics hating it, but then so you're just like, why would I spend that much money to go see it at the theater? And then when it came out on DVD, it was like, maybe I'll give it a shot. 2004, I mean, that was blockbuster heyday. And so I didn't go to theater because of it. I was just like, oh, okay, like I love sword and sandals epics and everything like that, but this is getting panned by the critics. So if I want to watch it, I'll watch it on DVD. And I think the rest of the world was that way too.
Do you think that also the fact that Stone's propensity toward doing this sort of historical mishmash sort of movie. Like we talked about JFK,
Mm-hmm.
Nixon. He's known for doing these very in-depth, deep dive dramatizations of history, but he's not known for making Gladiator. And I think, do you think that maybe that hurts it too? Is that it's not Gladiator? It's not a sword and sandals epic in terms of you're expecting Oliver Stone to deliver Maximus at the Colosseum challenging the Emperor or anything like that.
I think that was one of the cases. It was a double-edged sword, because the only reason why this movie was allowed to get made was because the success of Gladiator. That's the only reason why it worked. Is because he shopped this around, and I think 5 production companies and studios gave him like 4 production studios and companies, everything like that, gave him money to budget it, and Warner Brothers was the last to bring in money and become a distributor, because they just didn't believe in it. But once, Gladiator was a wild success and, like took all the Oscars, they're like, okay, well, didn't Stone have an idea for, something like this? And so that's when they started rolling. But the thing is, it's not Gladiator. It's not at all.
It's like Star Trek the Motion Picture. It's like, oh, Star Wars. Don't we have a star something that we can pull out?
It's kind of the same thing, but the thing is, Star Trek the Motion Picture is very much not Star Wars 77.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just interesting because of the fact, like when you mentioned how much you have a fondness for the film, I was immediately interested to see it, because it's like, oh, okay. I think it's interesting that I have a Stone movie that isn't particularly well loved universally that I have a fondness for. Now you do too.
Absolutely.
And so I think the big question is, Darren, why are you falling down on the job here? Were you like a closet Nixon fan and we didn't know it? You didn't bring that up last week?
No, I'm not a closet Nixon fan. Yeah, with this one, not that we're going to only compare it to Gladiator, but Gladiator is like Roman Empire, which is a topic we all learn in, American studies. But with this, it's like, it's kind of like it's a paragraph versus a chapter. Like I never learned, an entire chapter on the history of Alexander and this portion of history. So I think that kind of leads it to, and I think this is fueling what we were saying about it doing better in the video market than in the theatrical market. In the theatrical market, it's like, I have no idea who Alexander is. Like, oh, maybe the actors are a bit of a draw, but it's worth I'll spend a free Blockbuster rental on, not I want to, where I can sit at home, take a couple of bathroom breaks during this time, but it was interesting though, what you were saying about the different cuts, because I'd never thought of it this way. But if a movie has multiple cuts, it means each cut sold well, because once a cut stops selling well, they're not going to make more. And so it makes me kind of want to look back at other movies that have multiple cuts, because and look into like the finances a little bit, because I never thought of it that way, of not just, oh, the vanity of the director wanting to spin another tale, but there's always the economic component where no one's going to give you money to make more cuts if the last cut didn't do well. So obviously there was something there. Barring exceptions to the rule. I'm sure there are ones.
I was just going to say, kids, don't take this advice for Highlander 2. I've seen every cut of that film, and every one is worse than the previous. It just gets worse and worse every time. True. So do not apply this to Highlander 2. It's not the rule,
but it makes me look at it in a different light.
Yeah.
And I think you really hit it on the head, because Stone always wanted to make this a roadshow movie. Like, this was, like, you look at the works of Cecil B. DeMille, and you can't cut down 10 Commandments to 175 minutes. It's just not possible. You could, but it wouldn't be the epic that it is. It wouldn't be the beloved classic that it is. I'm not saying that Alexander is a beloved classic. I'm just saying that the doing roadshow movies is not as popular as shorter movies. Like, the economics of the times just doesn't lend itself to it. And with the home video market, you can go as long as you want, essentially. And also back then in 2014, 2007, 2005, 2004, and everything like that, you could risk a lot of money in the theater and make your money back in the DVD market. You can't
Right.
do that anymore.
Yeah, we've talked
That's
about
why
that
that's why
before.
we're not really getting a vast array of movies. Like streaming has killed the mid-level movie. Now, I'm not saying Alexander's a mid-level movie. I'm just saying like this is an example of a movie making its money back on DVD, and like having that many cuts is example of that. Like Warner Brothers made a lot of money off of these DVD sales. And even though this was a huge failure critically and award wise and money wise, it still was at the time one of Warner Brothers' most profitable home releases.
It'll just always fascinate me because I think just with you talking about that, it really does illustrate sort of an unseen casualty of the streaming era. Because how are you going to make money on multiple cuts? Just ask Zack Snyder how that's going for him right now. And with the whole
billion
Rebel
minutes watched. Thank you. I don't know what that means.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, how are you going to break that down to an investor? Hey, we only spent $607 per minute on this. Oh, okay. And like, it's, whatever. But like with all of that involved, isn't it also easy to go back and say that Stone has become caught in this? Like, is there a possibility of an ultimate final cut at some point in the future? Is there something where like he has notes where he's like, 4, I almost got it exactly right. And like, I would be curious, like from either one of you, because I know I have my own few notes and everything. Like, what would you cut from that? Like, what would you rearrange, or like, what is self-indulgent here?
So, from the ultimate cut of what we watched, like what
Yeah.
would we reorganize and move stuff around? Man, it's so strange because I really do feel like even because I've seen all 4 versions, and the ultimate cut is very much the version that I watch the most. And this is a movie when I don't know what to watch, this is what I'll put on. This is something that I'll like when I'm in my basement and say I'm storyboarding or I'm doing some animation or something like that. Like I'll put it up on one of my screens, and I was like, oh, I don't know, boom, Alexander Ultimate Cut right here. I actually, in preparation for this podcast, I was like, I haven't seen the final unrated cut in a very long time, so I actually watched that in preparation for this podcast just to remember what was the difference between that and the Ultimate Cut. And the Ultimate Cut is it is very much more streamlined than the final cut. And to me, I might trim a few scenes down, anything that I give you might sound pedantic. Where like Bagoa's dancing scene, for some reason that went on way too long.
I agree.
And there was a few times like that where like it's so strange because I guess I think we can transition into this a little bit more. Like one criticism that's I should say Stone got a lot of criticisms from a lot of people about what he focused on and what he didn't in Alexander the Great's life. Now, Darren, you say that you don't know much before this movie. You didn't know much about Alexander the Great. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, didn't know much. Just knew, when they list like, they always have that map where it's like, this is how much Genghis Khan covered, and this is how much Alexander the Great covered, and here's the Roman Empire, and then maybe there's like one other. Like those are always the 4 maps that is talking about conquering the known world at a point, and that was about it. Yeah, it's not a footnote, but it's a diagram and a paragraph.
Now, John, was there anything? What did you know? Just briefly, did you know anything about Alexander the Great before watching this movie?
I knew a bit about Alexander the Great, but if you said Alexander the Great to me, mostly pop culture stuff is what I would spit back at you. Like in Die Hard, when Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Benefits of a classical education. I know about Alexander and the Gordian knot legend. Right. And I make reference to it at work every so often, where I'm like, all right, this is a Gordian knot problem. Just cut the damn thing in half and let's just keep moving, sort of thing. And, of course, there was a reference to the time when Jim Morrison got an Alexander the Great haircut, and stuff like that. So I didn't know a whole lot about Alexander, but I knew a little bit. I knew, pop culture touch points, and that Shakespeare made reference to them and stuff like that.
Well, it's funny that you bring up the knot, because that's one of the things that people are like, really? You're going to do an Alexander the Great movie, but you're not going to show the knot? You're not going to show the burning of Persepolis? You're not going to show the siege of Tyre? Like there's so many different things. And also like, his pursuit of Darius III, the great king of Persia, like we see him at the beginning with the Battle of Gaugamel, and like they combined a couple of different battles because he fought Darius III 3 times. And I think I'm not Darius, I'm sorry, Darius. I'm going to do that a couple of times. He ran away 2 times. But the thing is that like it took him 3 years to battle Darius III. 3 years of battle pursuit. And there's tons and tons of intrigue behind this nemesis, this arch nemesis of Darius III and Alexander the Great. And there was like they exchanged letters a few times. In watching this movie, you would never think that there was this like that was his guy. He's just like, I'm coming to you. I'm coming to get you. But like at the end of the battle, like you can, when they say like, oh no, the left flank is crumbling. We need to get back, and he can either chase Darius or cover his left flank. He chose to cover his left flank, but if he chased Darius, he could have saved himself 3 years. Anyway, long-winded way to say that there is a lot that, there's a reason why they call him Alexander the Great, and Stone didn't include everything. And so that bugs some people. Now, John, was there anything that confused you while watching this movie? Like, because like I know a lot about Alexander the Great. And so I can't answer that question so much. Can you answer the question of like, oh wait, why did he do this? What did this mean? What, anything like that?
I think that to your point there, the through line with the pursuit is not strong enough. It would have been great to have that through line through the whole thing, so that you had a touch point where he would have conversations every so often, and somebody was like, dude, calm down. Invent a rage-filled, like throws the goblet across the way. He's like, why can't I catch this effer? Right. And it's like, people calming him down and couch some of the romantic stuff in that, where it's like somebody soothing the savage beast sort of thing. I think that there were some time jumps that, even with the assist of the title cards, there was one section in specific where it's like 9 years earlier, 7 years later, 8 years prior. I'm like, wait, 9 years, but is it 7 years later to the 9 years from the time I went there?
We could just put the actual year. If
right.
We knew the actual year. It's
exactly.
Like, why not? Because they go in order, guys.
And
that's all you got to do.
You don't like doing math? Like trying to...
Look. No, but the thing is my anger point. Like,
happen.
If it's 330 and then it's like 9 years prior, I could do that. Oh, that's 321, right? 7 years later. Well, is it 7 years after 330, or is it 7 years after 321, which is 2 years before? That's the jump around part that I'm talking about. That's the part where I think it gets muddy, and I think it's a shame, because I was interested in everything that was going on, but I think that for somebody who handled the time compression and overlays so expertly in JFK, it was a little shocking to me that he didn't get that here. And it made me wonder if it's because he didn't have the same editorial team with him, that you need that cast of, for lack of a better term, that cast of superstars, but not superstars because these editors are any less skilled, but the people who have the all-star team that played with Jordan before. You got to bring Pippen and Rodman back if you want to get this magic going again, because I think that editing sensibility from JFK could have really worked pretty darn well in some segments here, with how they handled time jumps and narration.
I think that's a valid criticism, because even like when you have 4 cuts of the film, you don't have an excuse anymore. Like you
Right.
do not have the excuse of saying like, oh, well, like me and the editors were rushed in 2004. Okay, well,
Right.
you had 10 years to make 4 cuts. So yeah, no excuse. I mean, I can't remember who said it, but a movie is never finished. Like you never.
It's
actually,
just abandoned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just released.
And I think that's definitely something that a lot of audiences didn't enjoy about this movie was the non-linear aspect of it, because you very much had to go by Alexander's haircut. You know, like,
Yes.
okay, he's got the long hair and the scruff. He's in India. He's got the short hair, but it's still Colin Farrell. So, okay, so like Philip is still alive. And you're like, okay, it's the young boy, you know, okay, so it's but it's not the young boy, you know, like it's, yeah, you have to match it through, but there's so much juggling that when you feel the need to say 9 years later but 7 years before this, you know, like it confuses audiences. And I think some people thought that way about the opening battle. They thought it was with the subtitle saying the Macedonian left and the center and things like that, thought it was like thought he was talking down to the audience.
Oh wow! See, I didn't get that at all.
I needed.
I
to
didn't
know
get that
what I was
either.
looking
No.
at because I wouldn't have known.
No,
Historians,
yeah.
a lot of historians have really praised that scene where it's just like, at that time with those armies, that's what it looked like. That's what it was. This is how he did it. This is how he won a war. Now, granted, that's like 3 battles combined into one. Like, you know, there was different things that happened, but it's all things that Alexander did with his army. And I think that's really cool to hear. Like, as someone who knows a lot about Alexander and someone who loves this movie, and you know, being burned by the doors, and with a lot of things being kind of like up in the air with JFK and Nixon, you know, after I'm currently reading a biography about Alexander, and I've read previous ones, and you know, comparing it to what's going on with Alexander, I was like, wow, that happened. This happened. You know, according to legend, this happened. There's so much that this movie got right.
So you said you've read these biographies. Have you read the biography that this film attributes a lot of its material to?
Not specifically that one. No, the one that I like the most it's called Alexander Freeman by Alexander the Great by Philip Freeman, and he presents it in a very, very, if you are a friend of the period, or the friend of, if you like the period or you like Alexander at all, I definitely recommend this book, because it is he presents what is facts, he presents as facts, and what is legend, he presents as legend. But he never tries to fool you and say like, oh, Alexander totally did this. It's just, as far as we know, this is what's going on. And I think that's one thing that Stone does really right here.
You know what I really dislike is that I didn't get enough of a feeling about about how important the libraries were to Alexander.
Yep.
Like, it was just sort of a footnote where it's like, and we'll put libraries and everywhere. And it's like, well, that's a part of him that I'd like to delve into, is his love of learning and the tragedy of everything. And if I'm very serious, I got a little annoyed by, at the end, as Ptolemy, Anthony Hopkins, is wrapping up his narration. And at the end, you know, in the title card is like, oh, by the way, yeah, whatever was written doesn't exist. And I'm like, you jerk. Like, you absolute, come on, man. Like, you had me believing that you would base this on some sort of historical record at least. And then at the end, it's like, oh, this whole framing device was, it was garbage. It was like, well, then it makes me question the whole framing device. Why did you even have it then? It wasn't necessary, was it? Like, that sort of thing.
Well, I felt like it was, you're 100% right. Like, when you find out that Ptolemy's writings were, you know, like Anthony Hopkins' narration wasn't based on anything except what they think Ptolemy thought.
Right.
You know, it was, I think it's an excellent framing device, because it gives you really great exposition and also gets Tony Hopkins to narrate, which I'm never opposed to.
True.
And it's kind of like the same way that they used Olympias's letters. Like, it was a real quick and easy way, and realistically, to showcase like, Parmenion, keep your eye on him, and Cassander, you know, he's an opportunist. You know, it's a way to do an exposition dump, but not have it feel like somebody is just monologuing at the camera where you shut it off. You're like, no, this is a letter from a mother to the son, and it makes sense. But Darren, was there anything where you're just like, oh my God, just like you're rolling your eyes at the exposition dumps? Was there any framing devices that you didn't like? You know, like what stood out to you that you're like, this just doesn't work?
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with John, with sometimes the 7-year, 2-year, 9-year prior post got a little much. Like that definitely stood out. But I would almost lean the other way. I had a hard time. Okay, I'm not the best with names, and especially when they're all like Macedonian names, and they're all like, what does Phil say in Hercules? He's like, a lot of yesses, like lots of, So I could have used a little bit more. I mean, this is the kind of movie where, the haircut matters because that's how you recognize people. And I would have liked more with, and I'll probably butcher the name, with Ptolemy. So Anthony Hopkins' character, I'm sure at one point I knew who he was in the past, but I didn't make that connection as strong as I really wanted to. I would have doubled down on that. I would have had him writing some stuff like in the past, like really make it through his lens. So if you're going to set it up with the Anthony Hopkins part, double down with that where you really get that point of view and make him, Alexander's confidant and the one that he, if you burned up the scrolls anyway, you could tell whatever story you want. But that's what I would have done, just a little bit more. It's interesting, as we were talking about home releases and other things. I think this story, especially the way that Stone is telling it, would have been an amazing miniseries.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like a 6-part something, like this would have been the thing everyone tuned into. And so you could have just, even if it was just battle to battle and every episode was a battle, tell more of the stories that people know. And so it, and we've talked about this before with Houselights, but yeah, often there are stories that, that should have been a TV show, like go season after season, like dive into that. I'll go to Star Wars, like the Clone Wars animated show told a better war story than a single movie that's like the Clone Wars. Like that gave us such a rich cast of characters and peoples and places and all of this stuff. So this would have been a great miniseries. I don't know where you would have aired it, but I think that would have been great.
I think that's probably, in my opinion, and I think the same as yours, is the best way to tell the story of Alexander, is because it from 338 BC to 325 BC, he had 20 major engagements. 20. And he won every single one of them. And there is so many amazing stories to be told. And also, John, you were talking about, about the libraries. Like he kept making Alexandrias. Like everywhere he went, he made an Alexandria.
But you didn't see him make Alexandrias.
You didn't see
I
him
agree
make
with you.
those, yeah.
He said he did it, but we never ever saw here's a spire that's in the middle of every Alexandria. Or something.
I just would have loved just a scene of him with his mom, like talking about how much he loved books and like he wished everybody could read or something like. I know how trite that sounds, but just like a moment where it establishes how important education was to him.
Yes, but at the same time, he does kind of have those moments. I feel like he had that moment with Hephaestion when I think his first night in Babylon, where he talks about how he's like, the people crave change. And he wanted to conquer Persia to bring the Greek way of life because, but you're right though, that this wasn't really clear because one big thing that, again, this is Alexander's thinking, not mine. But like one reason why he wanted to explore Persia and conquer Persia is not only to regain what was lost in previous years to Xerxes, but to spread Hellenistic way of life. And because in Persia, if your dad was a shoemaker, you were a shoemaker, and that was it. That was your line of work. But with Alexander the Great's way of life, with Macedonia and the Greek Isles and everything like that, the Greek countries, it was you could. Right, like you were born a shoemaker. Who cares? You could be a soldier. You can be a businessman. You'd be whatever you want to be, and
right.
that came with schooling, education. making sure the economy was regulated and everything like that. But we don't really see that. Again, I'm going on, and I was about to counteract your point, but then I started agreeing with you at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, that scene does exist. I'm just saying, like, it would have been better as a second scene, so that, like, hitting the points more. And that's what's so surprising about a movie this long, is I don't have those revisit points that I want or expect. Because, look, I can sit through a 3-4 hour movie. I don't mind. I don't care. Like, I dragged a friend to go see Kenneth Branagh's version of Hamlet, because I was like, I know, isn't it beautiful?
Oh my
but
God.
like I was going to see that in movie theater come hell or high water, but I still require, maybe you can see this as a shortcoming, but you got to hit the point every so often to bring me back up to speed. And that's probably why the jumping around year thing that we were talking about earlier is so disorienting to me. Is it's not bringing me up to speed. It's like, oh, quick information dump on stuff we haven't told you before. I'm like, wait, I'm still trying to retain everything I had up to this point.
Well,
and now this is all recasting things.
I will say with the year, it clicked once you said BC. I think that's why he did the 9 years prior, 7 years after, because once you start to put years, the problem is you're BC, so everything's counting down. So if they're like, hey, and 258, and then now it's 243, time has gone forward, but it doesn't look like it, and that would be more confusing. So right. I think that makes more sense that he said just the years rather than the dates.
Well, ultimately, ideally, you would cut it in such a way that I don't need those date cards to begin with, where you don't need to lead me by the hand.
At the bottom of the screen the entire time, a little right. Alexander walking along. I mean, hey, we laugh, but
everybody knows I have a soft spot for Nolan and everything like that. Nolan doesn't do that for me, and he jumps around, and I'm like, okay, and I'm with him. I'm like, okay, I got you, and I'm going around and everything.
Didn't they do that? I can't remember what country they did that in, but when Inception came out, they labeled the dream layers. Like they put like a little. Like that, it was like a lower third where there's just like, oh, this is the second layer. Oh, now you're in the third layer, and it was there during the movie, which is insane. I cannot remember the country though who did that.
Oh man.
Well, to that point, I'll ask you guys. I mean, not that it didn't work, but would you watch a cut of this movie that is just straight chronological? Goes from his youth to the death of his dad, through the battles, no intercutting, or do you think that would just rob it of its greatness?
That would be a mistake. That would be a mistake with this particular interpretation of Alexander.
I agree. You need the jumps, but it's just about handling them. It just doesn't stick the landing with it, is all.
John, I think you really hit it on the head when you said that there was no through line. I think that really that really illustrates the major failing of this movie, and I think why it didn't connect with audiences. Because if you had and I'm not saying it would have made a better film, but I think it would have made a much better mainstream film if it had that through line where it was, you know what, I'm going to go to Persia, I'm going to do this, I'm going to kick Darius's ass, and I'm going to spread education to the world. I want to spread Hellenism to everybody. This is what I'm going to do. If that was the through line, I think people would have been able to grab onto it. But in Stone's piece, in Alexander, came out in 2004, and subsequent cuts, I think it was much more of an inner workings of the character itself, like his battle with his own demons of his mother and his father. I feel like that's that's the story he wanted to tell, and that's what came across. And so you can't have that through line of Darius III, the great king, and also because it's there's when you do that as a through line, you have to include so much more. You're like, are you gonna talk about how he wasn't able to leave Greece right away? Like when he had to work his way to Persia and Asia. Like why aren't we talking about Egypt where he became Pharaoh? It's just like it needed that through line though for people to grasp on, for average moviegoer to grasp on.
But that sort of peeks through what you're talking about. Is there are a couple of great moments later in the film where he's being challenged and all of a sudden he sees his dad, and it like shocks him, And it's implied, and it probably would have made people extremely uncomfortable, but I think you should have had a couple of moments like that where Rosario Dawson is swapped out with Angelina Jolie, even when they're about to be intimate, where you see this framing of he knows the story of Oedipus. He knows the warnings of the myths. He's obsessed with the myths, and you start to see these echoes in his life, and he starts to see the echoes and lean into a little more of the trippy stuff that he did with, say, the beginning of The Doors to emphasize, those sorts of things. But I mean, as a whole, Darren, I don't think a linear version of this could ever work. It needs to jump. It needs to go around.
And I wasn't necessarily saying that was my view. I was just curious what your guys' view was, because sometimes that could tie up a lot of the issues, because it just, it's like, what year is this? Well, it's obviously after what we just saw because he's getting older, and then you have the jump to, a jump in actors. But yeah, it's one of the movies that you would talk about in film school. Like, I could see people cutting into this movie because there's a lot to kind of like introspect on.
I think that would be a lot of fun too, because when you only tackle the greats, if you only analyze Godfather and Citizen Kane,
right?
Like how much can you learn? But like if you look on stuff that didn't work but yet still has good qualities, it gives you more of a conversation. And that's one of the reasons why we should
podcast about that.
Yeah, we don't just review 5-star films. But I want to talk about the actors a little bit. We haven't really talked about the performances too much. So let's start at the top. Let's start with the Irish Alexander the Great. So
he had blonde hair.
Colin Farrell could not get rid of his Irish accent. Nope. And so Stone is like, okay, everybody else do an Irish accent. And like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's why Val Kilmer as Philip has an Irish accent. That's why the young actor who plays Alexander had an Irish accent. That's why Jared Leto as Hephaestion has a little bit of an Irish accent, is because they all tried to make it sound like, okay,
it's not Irish, it's Macedonian.
But that's the thing, though, is that like
it works,
people complain about that, but that's the thing, is that like he wouldn't have an American accent. So what does it matter? And also people complained about Angelina Jolie's accent, saying like that doesn't sound like ancient Greek. I was like, yeah, but she wasn't from Macedonia. So they were just trying to say that she was a foreigner.
Listen, one of my favorite movies from childhood is Highlander. And if I could live with Sean Connery being a 3,000-year-old Egyptian.
Haggis?
Yeah.
What is haggis?
Yeah. Yeah, the Scottish guy's never heard of it. But like, the thing is, instead of leaning that way, I would have gone more like that Hercule Poirot series where nobody tries an accent. Just speak in your normal voice. And that way the conceit doesn't fall apart. It's just there. It's just, we're not trying, because Greek people, when they speak Greek, they don't hear, oh, I have a Greek accent. That's just normal speaking to them. Right. So if we're going to translate it into English to begin with, everybody just don't bother. Just show up and just speak how you speak.
Well, just like that scene when Alexander meets Bagos for the first time, and Bagos is speaking English with a heavy Spanish accent.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Oh, you speak our language?" He's like, "Yes, great king." Like, yeah, they're speaking English, but we hear that. Like when you try to unravel it, when you pull in the thread, the whole thing unravels. It was just like the whole thing about accents in movies is just insane to me. But anyway, regardless of accent, what did you guys think? Like Darren, what did you think about Colin Farrell as Alexander? Did you think he pulled off this leader, this great king, this wannabe emperor?
He does, but I can never not see Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
Every single frame. Like he does not lose himself in and I think that's just because of who Colin Farrell is. And nothing against him or his acting. It's not the kind of actor that can disappear. It just won't.
Until recently with Batman.
Okay. Without heavy prosthetics and makeup. Okay. But that is true. Okay. The Penguin, yes. I see
2004, to be fair to you, Darren, 2004 Colin Farrell could not have done what 2022 Colin Farrell did with the Penguin.
Absolutely. So yes, at this time, he sticks out like a sore thumb. But I don't mind it, because he acts very well. Like it's an interesting. I mean, we were talking a lot about people for Alexander to talk to give us insight, but that's really hard because he's a very lonely character. He has a lot of turmoil, a lot of inner thoughts, but we don't have internal dialogue, so he has to convey all of that on his face, on the way he looks at people, his interactions. He's kind of crazy. I mean, he's a little nuts, for what that Alexander is. But no, I really enjoyed Colin's. It's not one of those cases where I'm trying to think back to 2004 and thinking who else in the star lineup I would have put in this. I can't really think of anyone, but I think he did a great job.
I think Farrell did what was asked of him, but I'll fault Stone because Alexander didn't feel in certain key moments like a great leader or somebody who was going to inspire somebody to charge into battle. There was just something about his demeanor that he was a very interesting character. He was a very believable human being, but I never saw him turn on that gear of I'm thirsty for blood and you'd better be thirsty for blood too. And everybody, that Braveheart yell is like, yeah, we're going to eat everybody alive. We're going to come at, like, that's the sort of gear that I never saw from Farrell.
I will counter that. I know where you're going, John. I think, and I don't know if this is how Alexander really was, but I think the way Stone portrayed him was not the rousing speech, but the I know my men kind of leader. Like, he was always like grasping someone, knew his name, knew his dad, was like, hey, you've served with me this long, like, let's go kick butt. And he did that enough throughout the entire movie that I'm like, that's how he inspired the men. It wasn't the big speech. It was the, and then at the end, it's like, I'm going to ride in and do what we need to do against the elephants. And, that's the most rousing, they're going to follow his banner moment of the whole movie.
Yeah. I'm not looking for the Braveheart speech. I'm just looking for that extra gear. And it's a hard one for me to put into words, but it's like, I just never saw that gear shift up where I was like, all right, we're in turbo mode now. And I think it's a very complicated role. Obviously Stone's asking for a lot of nuance here. And I just think it was, Colin Farrell now does this role without even thinking about it. Colin Farrell then, I don't know if he was ready for it.
Except for he's not 25, so that's
a minor problem.
Only minor problem is you have to put a young actor in this role because he's not that old.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you say that, Darren, because that was a key component of Alexander's leadership. Like, the real Alexander was that he knew his men. He knew his men. He fought with his men. He was always on the front lines. He was always going into battle with them, and he took the time to understand them and their families, their goals, their wants, their desires, even their mistresses, everything like that. And John, it was definitely a conscious decision by Stone to, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but it was a conscious decision by Stone to make Colin Farrell's performance of Alexander not macho, not that bloodthirsty,
sure,
let's go up there. Like, he wanted a much more sensitive man, like, to kind of play on that, and this is his words, like, play on that bisexuality of, not necessarily in terms of sexual attraction, but the bisexuality of the masculine and the feminine, where this is a man who was raised by not only Philip II, but also Olympius. And, and so, like, it was kind of that situation. So I can see where you're coming from, and also know that, like, you're not off base because that was a conscious decision. Now, whether that worked or not is totally up to the viewer, but that your insight doesn't come out of nowhere is what I'm saying.
Well, I appreciate that. No, I like it. I appreciate as well that Stone is trying to show, like I said, that a much more believable human being. And maybe it's just my habit or something, but it's like I've never gone into battle, but I have followed people into crazy things before, and there is that extra adrenaline rush you got to get out of somebody to risk your butt to do something. So
now, Now, John, do you think that Philip II, Val Kilmer's, portrayal of Philip II, do you think you'd follow that guy into battle? What do you think about his performance?
Not in 1,000 years. Yeah, I think that Kilmer almost does like a riff on Morrison in this.
I don't see that at all. You said that earlier. I don't see that.
I hear a little bit of it. No, I'm not saying it as a slight, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm saying this is like taking all of those negative, the drunkard, the horrible person, the blowhard, all of that type of stuff, and just cranking it all the way up. And I just seeing that guy that's always too much for people to handle, sort of thing. And I think that
I saw it when he picked up the loot and just started shredding. It was so amazing.
But what I enjoyed as well was like Kilmer had that. I wish it had happened maybe earlier in the film when you had that almost quasi tender moment where he took him down into the underground and started explaining the myths to him. Like I almost felt like I could have used this earlier in the movie for me to understand why Alexander had any loyalty to this guy before this point. Like that,
and
there was not enough build.
And that was a big moment. And also in previous cuts, that was spliced up into two separate moments.
Interesting.
And in the ultimate cut, I think the final cut too, they put it together as one and also expanded it and reorganized it a little bit internally. And this is one of my favorite scenes. I really feel like Kilmer just really understood Philip II in that moment. And the Bucephalus scene where he tames the horse, I mean, that according to history, that actually happened. That scene happened the way that it did. And Alexander loved Bucephalus so much that when his horse died, he named a town after his horse. And it's just like that's how important that moment was to him. And also Philip II, that's how important horses was to him too. So like that was one of those things that bridged them together, because on the day of Alexander's birth, a messenger came and told him, it was like, hey, two great things happened today. The horse that you sponsored won the race, and it was a huge big deal. He's like, and your son was born. He's like, fantastic. Strike a coin to commemorate this fantastic day. I love that horse.
Yeah.
That's who Philip II was. And so when Alexander did something great, like tame a horse that people said couldn't be tamed, and he was so young, is like, I like that kind of led to that cave scene. But because we're jumping around, we don't really have that, because like we see that drunken blowhard and everything like that. And also the scene where he tries to sexually assault Olympias, that, according to history, that actually happened, where Alexander was there. Philip didn't know he was there. And also there were snakes in the bed. And and like people came in and said, like, Philip, you can't do this. This is insane. This is disgusting. And he's drunk and raving, blah, 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 blah. And so like that impacts you, because like I love Stone's editing of that moment, because like, Alexander's young, he's in bed, he's with his mom, like it's all soft and everything like that. And all of a sudden this drunken blowhard comes in and just tears everything down to pieces. And it's this weird dichotomy of Alexander as an individual.
Well, I mean, it speaks to the culture of the time as well, because if I'm remembering correctly, children were considered not worth speaking to until they were like 7 years old. And so Alexander would have been not really interacting with Philip by that point. I might have my time periods a little off, but I remember that from a history class, where it was like once boys hit the age of 7, then it was like, oh, okay, you're rational now. You can come on out into the world, or something like that.
I'm not quite sure. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I don't know. I don't remember reading that. Again, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. But what did you, Darren? Did you like Angelina Jolie as Olympias? Did you think she was too mustache twirling? Were you just like, oh, that's Angelina Jolie in an accent? Like, what did you think of that portrayal? It's a two-part question. What did you think of Jolie's performance, and what did you think of Olympias being such an anchor in the story of Alexander in Stone's interpretation?
No, I mean, as we've said, like the letters from her to him are imperative to understanding like kind of what's going on, the political climate. Very, Games of Thrones, House of Cards kind of vibes. Like she she is all politics. And that's the other thing with Alexander. He's like at least as he's shown, it's like no politics. So the fact that they actually share very few scenes in the same location, but I mean, one of my favorite shots is when who is it? It wasn't Alexander. It was someone else or maybe it was. I'm blanking. But someone was confronting her, and Angelina Jolie's face is just normal, but the reflection in like the pool of water next to them, she's like grinning maniacally, and and then it cuts and it shows. Do you remember who she was arguing with? Was it Alexander? I don't think.
Yeah, it was Alexander. Alexander saw the reflection, but the thing is, that's a trick that he plays with Philip later, the substitution, and that's something that you see him do in Nixon and even in JFK as well, where the person's true face is revealed in a certain moment, even though the dialogue is still going on, the soundtrack is uninterrupted, but you see the person see through the veil of the person that they're interacting with. Yeah, those are the moments that I'm latching onto, where I'm like, I wanted more of those.
Yeah,
throughout the movie,
a little more. It's a little more epic poem-ish. Embellish a little bit. Like we almost. I mean, I know this was a real man, but we almost needed like a monster or something that was driving him, that he was running from. Some jackal that pursued him across the plain, because you had that moment with his mother, but you also had where he saw the face of a Medusa in the jug of wine at the very end, which I was very telegraphed of, like, this is your death, like if you drink this, like, and that part got better towards the end. But but overall, to your question, Tristan, I think she was definitely utilized well, because she was setting the stage for like the politics for what he was up against. I can't imagine, like, if that role got plucked out, like, you would be even more lost. I mean, we talked about no through line. Without that, you would just be rudderless in this story.
Absolutely. And when you guys were talking about the showing the true faces, and that was one thing I really enjoyed about the editing style, was that every once in a while this person would still be talking, but yet you'd see a close up of their face and they weren't talking. Like it's not done very often. It's like almost like a coverage shot, but yet that individual is still speaking. And I think they did a really great job of doing that with Olympias. And also when Alexander threw the wine at him, the wine goblet at Attalus, like, they were arguing back and forth. And when he's saying, he's like, finally a legitimate son, and like a wife that Philip can be proud of. Like, while he's screaming that, we see a shot of Attalus staring at Alexander. It's the visual language of, this is directed at me. Like, I'm being insulted right now, and Philip's doing nothing about it. And that was a scene that actually happened according to history. That was a real scene, and filled with many real quotes. Like when Philip fell off, and he says, like, this is the man that you think's going to take you to Asia. I mean, you can't even go from one couch to the next. That's a real quote from Alexander. And so like, that's one thing I really enjoyed.
Mennonite burns.
Mennonite? I think you mean Macedonian.
Oh, yeah. Macedonian. Sickest of Macedonian burns. He took his glasses off and dropped them.
Yeah. But that was one of the things, like, the editing of this movie is definitely one of my favorite things, specifically for moments like that. Now, John, I would love to ask you about the music. Oh, what did you think about this music?
Oh, it's magnificent score. And through the entire thing, I was sitting there, and I shared this with you prior to this, where the entire time I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, this is a great score. It really sounds like Vangelis. I bet you this, it's probably not, but this really sounds like they're going for Vangelis. And then at the end, composed by Vangelis, I was like, yes, I was right. And boy, was I right. I was absolutely thrilled by the score. I thought, this is, now we haven't done a whole lot with Stone, but I loved Williams's score for JFK. Nixon, whatever. But then this is whatever other flaws might exist for this movie, he got the right person to score this for him. This is every bit as epic and memorable a score as it needs to be for a Sword and Sandals epic. That's my take on it.
I agree 100%. Like this is a soundtrack, or I should say a score that I listen to often, that I'll have in the background, like if I'm reading or just like hanging out or working. Like this is something that this is one where I can absolutely visualize what's going on when I'm listening to it. And I think I'm not saying that's the best sign of a great score, but it's, I think in my opinion, one of the great,
good.
it's, yeah. So Darren, did you feel the same way? Did you enjoy the score?
Yeah, no, I really did. I think I did look up Vangelis, and I'm like, oh, look, 1492, Conquest of Paradise, our favorite. But, that was more about all the other aspects of that movie as opposed to the score. But yeah, he's done, Chairs of Fire, you have Blade Runner bits, you have Alexander, The Bounty. So yeah, this was really good score.
I can't even imagine Blade Runner without Vangelis.
Oh no. And the whole dispute he's had with the producers and everything through the years and everything, that's just a shame that he felt. Yeah. Anyway, that's a different podcast. Never mind.
Well, same podcast, different director. But yeah.
Yes.
So we've been going for an hour and 5 minutes.
We're just starting, guys. It's gonna go full 320.
I know, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on discussing this film. And I need to come clean with you guys. This week I watched it twice. I watched the director's cut, and then I watched the ultimate cut with the director's commentary on, and then I watched the full-length documentary that his son did about the making of Alexander. It's not very good. Don't watch it.
Okay.
But this is a movie I could talk about for friggin' ever. But we have to abandon the project. We can't do 4 cuts of this podcast. Now, before we get into final thoughts, I want you guys to quickly tell me, so from moving forward, like when someone says, "Hey, have you ever seen Alexander?" What's the scene that pops into your brain?
The thing is, there's a lot, and that's to its credit. But what scene absolutely pops for me where I think that's an amazing scene, that's the scene that I would use to try to sell somebody, is actually a very quiet scene where they're on the mountaintop, beautifully shot, all of this snow, he's in a red cloak, and I think it's Ptolemy comes up to him and says, that peak over there, that's where they say, that's where Prometheus is, and up above him is an eagle's nest where he comes down and pecks out his liver every night. That's a scene that I would use actually to sell people on it, because this is a sword and sandal epic that is not what you expect. And small moments like that are why. So that's the scene that I would use to sell it, to be like, you're going to get something that's a little more nuanced and in depth about a historical figure than you're used to.
Darren, what pops in your brain?
I mean, it's so hard because there is a lot. This movie also has the ability of not feeling like a special effects heavy movie. It just feels like you stuck a camera back in time. All the special effects are just hidden in the best way possible. But it might be a cliche, but the end charge is just so incredible when the color starts to shift and he's just like, I'm now granted, he's not speeching it up as much as he should. And I'm totally interjecting like speeches from Lord of the Rings and Ride to Ruin and Red Dawns, which should have been there. But besides the speech part, because there's a shift. You feel the shift of like, I have to go to my men, and there's a lot of people are going to die right now. Like, this is not going well. That moment. I if I had to say the counter to that, I think the tiny footnote of he shouldn't have gone in the desert and he lost a lot of men. And I'm like, what?
It was the biggest blunder of his life.
I'm like, wait. So we're not talking about the biggest blunder of his life, but what? Yeah, that felt way glossed over.
I personally think they spent too much time in India.
Yeah, kind
Fair.
of.
I was just like, you're not going to talk about the siege of Tyre or Persepolis or all the Alexandrias that they built, but you're going to spend that much time in India where he got his ass kicked.
Well, and like, or again with the Alexandrias, show me one being built, and show time progressing and him falling in love with the people, and then like, hey guys, we got to keep going. And they're like, why not? Like, why not have this be the edge of your empire? This is a perfectly good spot. More of that. But that's just wishful thinking.
Now, before we get into Lance Reddick and final thoughts, one thing I need to share with you guys that I think is hilarious that Alexander actually did this, and there's so many things that they didn't include where you're just like, man, this guy Alexander, I don't know about him. But there was a time when I think when Darius first ran away, and Alexander captured Babylon, captured Darius's mother, his sister, two sisters maybe, I think, I can't remember. And Darius sent Alexander a letter saying, listen, if you stop now, you can have everything that you've taken of the Persian Empire. You can have Babylon. And Babylon's just, that's like, it's like if somebody invaded America and they said, you can keep New York City if you want. Just leave us alone. Like, you can keep New York, you can keep Washington, but just leave us alone. And Alexander didn't show anybody else the letter and said, I got a letter from Darius, and he called all of you guys jerks and that he hates you.
Right.
Oh, I kind of want to see that. That sounds amazing.
Like, he called us jerks? He's like, yeah, he totally did. And that your mother's
like, you're totally
fat.
making this sound like an episode of The Office, but that I totally am here for the vibe.
But like that, like that's what he did. Like every single general in his army would have been crazy rich, and they wouldn't have had to travel any further, and they would have conquered a huge portion of the Persian Empire, and they could have called it all wins. And Alexander's like, no, not enough. I want all of Persia. I want Darius. I want all of it. And he lied about the contents of the letter. And there's so many times when Alexander did stuff like that makes you just go like, man, that's insane. But wasn't covered by stone. Okay, so as we always do every single week, because we're huge Lance Reddick fans and we believe that every movie is improved with Lance Reddick, we try to come up with a replacement casting where could we see Lance Reddick in Alexander. And this is not a negative comment on any of the actors. It's just like, Lance Reddick of any age at any time, where would we put him? Now, John, I'm going to go with you. No, I'm going to go with Darren first. Darren, where would you put Lance Reddick?
Yeah, again, it's often difficult to place Lance in a historical context, but I would have liked to see him try the scene with Aristotle. So I'm doing a swap for Christopher Plummer, who didn't have a lot of roles, so it's a little easier to drop in, or not a lot of screen time, but just that teacher voice, that like, talking to young boys and stuff. And again, if we're trying to spin it, we could throw in something of like a scholar from another land is teaching whatever, but that doesn't really matter. I think Lance would have been just perfectly dropped into that role.
Same choice from me.
Really?
Yep. I would have dropped him in as Aristotle. I think it would have been really interesting to see. Again, like you said, doesn't take anything away from Plummer, but I like the idea of him as Aristotle, and talk about any historicity or anything like we mentioned earlier. Everybody has an Irish accent. Who cares?
I actually would have gone with Clitus. Clitus is the guy who got super pissed off that he had a satrap so far away from his homeland, and Alexander actually murders with a spear. And he was Philip II's man, and he saved Alexander's life. He was much older than Alexander, looked after him, but at the same time was disappointed the way that Alexander was going, so straying from Philip's vision, and ended up getting murdered by Alexander. I feel like Reddick could have done the very mentor-esque thing, like, listen, boy, like, like, I saved your life. I can take it away again. Like, it's very much I'm older and wiser than you. You need to watch out for me. and at the same time giving that raw anger, that drunken rage to Alexander in his final scene.
Okay.
But that's just me. That's
Fair
just
enough.
me.
I want to see people carrying Lance Reddick out as he's yelling at Alexander the Great. That's
Right.
just right there. I'm sold.
Exactly.
Totally
See, and that's the
sold.
thing. And that's a real, according to known history, that's a real scene. Like that actually happened. And I love how Hephaestion is like, for the love of the gods, get him out of here.
Yeah.
So Darren, I'm making you go first. How many
It's tradition.
Alexandrias
So
are you giving this film?
yeah, this was an interesting one because, like I mentioned before, visually beautiful movie. Obviously, special effects are involved, but I couldn't see them. I just felt like you dropped a camera in something BC, and but the story and the time jumping and the lack of line, it's not a movie. I'm not going to be like you, Tristan. I'm not going to watch it like 3 times in 3 different versions on one afternoon. I do get in the background. That's a maybe possibility. My background, I call it my packing movie. If I'm just packing for a trip, is usually Lord of the Rings extended editions because those just play. But yeah, I'm going to give it a 3. I feel I liked it better than Nixon. Nixon was a little more all over the place for me. A little less Anthony Hopkins in this one, so maybe that's it. But no, I have to give it credit for what it did accomplish, and from score to acting to a lot of the good aspects, even though it wasn't a commercial success in the box office. So I'm going to give it 3 Alexandrias. Alexandretta. There's another movie I want to watch instead. So yeah.
John, same question.
This is a movie that could have been better in a number of ways, but is nonetheless fascinating and kept my attention through the entire thing. So it's one of those things where I was stunned how long the opening battle went. And I mean, I was like, what, how deep am I into this thing before I'm even getting anything besides a fight? And I was like, that's a bold choice. That's a really bold choice. So it's a very interesting, I might like it more if I watch it again sort of vibe to this. So it comes in with a 3.5 from me.
I think you guys have given a lot of really interesting points. And I told you guys beforehand off mic that even though this is The Doors, and John did a great job of taking criticism with stride, saying like, yep, totally get it, 100%. Yep, that sucked too. That didn't happen. I told myself I was going to be the same way. And that's the thing, is that like, this is a deeply flawed movie. This is not a 5-star film, like at all. Like there's so much wrong with it. And there's so much that could have gone differently, and that Stone could have gone better. And we're almost at the 1 hour and 20 minute mark. We didn't even talk about Rosario Dawson's portrayal, or Jared Leto, or John Rhys Davies, or not John Rhys Davies, John Rhys Meyers.
Yes.
Like we didn't talk about any of those people. There's so much to this, but I think that through line is its main point against it. And so I'm going to give it 5 stars.
Fair enough.
Knew that was coming.
I mean, that's the thing. It's just like, this is not a 5-star film. It's not, guys. But I am so obsessed with it. I am choosing not to be rational, and I'm giving it 5 stars.
I gave 5 stars to Stargate. And you want to talk about a movie with like flaws and issues? Like, yeah, of course. Is it perfect by your perfect scale, Tristan? No, but we're allowed to just slap it's like, you're reaching for whatever number, and it's like, oh, sorry, I hit the 5.
I slipped.
I
so
slipped.
Sorry. that is what's happening tonight. Now, Darren, what are we doing next week? Because we are closing the door on the House of Stone.
We are, and next we're going with slightly shorter movies, but it's going to be a really interesting time as we go to the House of Cosmatos here on Houselights. Next week, starting with Rambo, First Blood, Part 2.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.